Now that the Oppressor Mark II is $8 million, it's hard to say whether it's still the best vehicle in the game, which is why in today's episode of Billionaire's Beginnings, I'm going to be purchasing a vehicle that I think may be able to replace it. But of course, we won't know until we buy it and try it out. So with that being said, let's get into how we made our money. The vehicle we're going to purchase in this episode cost just under $3 million, and I started off the episode with just over $1. So we had to make up about a $1.5 to $2 million gap. And of course, we started off with the time trials. Now, they were relatively easy. The first one gave me a bit of trouble, but after about 5 or 6 attempts, we were able to complete it. And then we went on to the HSW time trial. And of course, because we have the Hakuchu drag, which has insane amounts of speed, we were able to complete that pretty quickly. And that right there was about $350,000 in just 20 to 25 minutes of time. So those time trials took us to just under $1.9 million. So next up, we did a bunker sell mission because we haven't done one in quite some time, and we had a few $100,000 worth of stock just sitting there. So we went over, completed that sell mission. We got very lucky, only giving us one sell vehicle, and it was the one where it's the Phantom Wedge attached to a trailer. So you can literally plow through everybody on the highway, which is exactly what I did. Got through everybody, finally reached the destination down at the docks, and made us $420,000. Next up, I went over to the nightclub and increased my popularity to earn some passive income. But the way I did it this time was actually by tossing out someone who was a disturbance in the nightclub for the first time. And there's a trick to this. If your popularity is relatively high, I believe 80 or 90% or above, you're then able to go into passive mode, enter your nightclub, and when you get in your nightclub, there will be a blue dot on the minimap. If you head over to that blue dot, which is someone who's been a disturbance to the nightclub, you can then toss them out, you get $10,000, and you get an increase in your nightclub popularity. So it is a free way to increase your popularity. Usually I switch back and forth between DJs, so this was a lot better. I also collected $200,000 from the wall safe, and then it was time to sell on our nightclub stock. And I've been selling it at about $1 million pretty regularly. Now, sometimes it's better to go over 1 million because Tony's cut of your sale is always $100,000 or 10%. So if you go over 1 million, you're actually maximizing your money. But I've found at the $1 million mark, some of the products that we could source, such as cash, are already full. And because those are the highest earning products to source, there's no point sourcing the lower earning products just to try to squeeze out a little bit more money in the sell mission. So I sell at about $1 million now, and we took home $900,000 because we did it in an invite only session. And with that, we were then able to purchase the vehicle for the episode, which is the original Oppressor. Now, this of course is the predecessor of the Oppressor Mark II, but the two vehicles are fairly different. The Oppressor is essentially a bike that has a rocket boost and has wings that could come out to allow it to glide when it's in the air. So you could essentially fly around on the Oppressor, or glide around rather on the Oppressor. It takes a little bit more skill than the Oppressor Mark II, but the big difference is that unlike the Oppressor Mark II, this rocket boost or the jet engine in the back is not constant. So it's not a flying bike. It's a bike that can glide. So of course, the first thing I did was I took it out for a spin, and I hit the rocket boost quite a few times, hit quite a few jumps with it, got up in the air, and tried out the gliding mechanic. Now, it does take a little bit of time to get used to, but essentially, once you get up into the air and you're gliding, as long as you over time pull up on the bike slowly, it will continue to glide to whatever destination you want. So it's actually really good to use in the city. You can get around the city fairly quickly and pretty easily. But of course, like I said, it's not a constant boost, so you will have to come back to the ground, spend about a few seconds on the ground before recharging that rocket boost and being able to take off once again. So that's about it when it comes to its aerial abilities. But if used on the ground as an actual bike with the rocket boost, it goes extremely fast. So that is a plus. It is great to have on the ground. So you have those two options. You could use it for one or the other. The bike stock comes with a machine gun mounted to the front of it, which is okay. It's not the best machine gun ever, but you are able to purchase homing missiles for it. Although the only catch is, unlike the Oppressor Mark II, where you take it to the terabytes and can purchase the homing missiles right away, you actually have to do bunker research to unlock that ability to get the homing missiles. So it does add an extra barrier to this bike, which is a little bit unfortunate. And what I did was I went into our bunker, went to bunker research, assigned our staff to research, purchase supplies, and luckily for me, on our very first research attempt, I did get the Oppressor missiles, which is insane. If you're watching this, please understand that this is not normal. You could go through like 5 or 6 different unlocks until you eventually hit the Oppressor missiles, but we got really lucky and we were able to then fast track that process. Of course though, because I spent all my money on the Oppressor, I had to first do a Coca-Cola lockup sell mission as well as a payphone hit, but once we had that money, we went in, I fast tracked the research progress on the bunker, and then was able to purchase the homing missiles. Once we had those on, I of course took it out for another spin to see how the missiles were and how it handled if we were going to, for example, get into some combat, and it felt decently good. The missiles for the Oppressor are very similar to the Oppressor Mark II, so there's not much of a difference there. But I will say it is a little bit easier aiming the bike or aiming the missiles with the Oppressor, simply because we're gliding and we're able to make these more angled turns versus the Oppressor Mark II, where sometimes you have to back up or do an awkward maneuver. But now with all that being said, I wanted to compare it to the Oppressor Mark II. And I gotta say, the big thing that I mentioned earlier was the fact that the Oppressor Mark II has a constant rocket boost, or essentially like a jet engine in the back of it, propelling it forward. It is a flying bike, not a gliding bike. So it is fairly quick on the ground, similar to the Oppressor with the rocket boost and on wheels, but it is so much faster in the air, considering we also have an additional rocket boost on top of that jet engine in the back. I should also mention that it's a lot easier to maneuver in the Oppressor Mark II, just taking really sharp turns, going under bridges, between buildings. It's very easy to get around the map and is way more intuitive than the original Oppressor. So when it comes to completing missions and getting around the map efficiently, the Oppressor Mark II is still miles better than something like the original Oppressor. On the other hand though, when it comes to getting around the city or maybe some PvP battles, the Oppressor Mark I is probably relatively comparable to the Oppressor Mark II. And finally, while they both have very comparable weapons, the ease of access or the ease of equipping the missiles onto the Oppressor Mark II really beats out how hard it could be with the Oppressor Mark I. So with all that being said, I gotta say, the Oppressor Mark II I think is still by far the best vehicle in the game, even at the $8 million price point. And if we're including everything into the equation, the Oppressor Mark II, to purchase it and get the missiles onto it, is probably going to be closer to $10–11 million, considering you have to buy a nightclub and a terabyte. But on the flip side, the Oppressor also requires you to have a bunker and have the MOC. So they're both very costly vehicles, but of course the Oppressor is considerably less, about half the price than the Oppressor Mark II. Which brings me to my final statement. If you're someone who doesn't play the game as much or is a beginner, getting the Oppressor really isn't a bad option. But if you're someone who really does grind out the game, plays it quite a bit, and is always all over the map, the Oppressor Mark II is still going to be by far the best solo vehicle, or just vehicle in general, to get. So is the original Oppressor better than the Oppressor Mark II? I don't know, let me know in the comment section down below. It's a difficult decision. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.